Han Mubeek, Han Nguyen. Jean couldn't shake off the sense of discomfort gnawing at him. One of his fellow students explained that Han Mubeek was currently the most notable talent in the 1001 Hall and could even wield sword chi. Jean thought to himself that he had already asked for more investigation to be done, but for now, he needed to focus on the group battle training. The teacher's voice boomed as he declared that they would be divided into 9 groups and undergo 2 mock battles. The 3 groups at the bottom would be expelled from the 1001 Hall, while the rest would be deployed in practical battles. Their deployment location was Qinghai, a region firmly within the sphere of influence of one of the largest factions among the unorthodox sects, Evil Domineering Heaven. Jean recalled that Evil Domineering Heaven had been founded by the unorthodox sect's prodigy, one of the 5 kings of the Central Plains, the myriad sinful king Gu Yamyang. However, when Gu Yamyang died without naming a successor, the sect immediately plunged into a bloody civil war. What was most surprising was that the youngest disciple, only 28 years old, emerged as the victor instead of the eldest and most powerful disciple. Even more troubling was the sudden and rapid cooperation between the orthodox sects and Evil Domineering Heaven that followed, forming the very root of the orthodox-unorthodox murim alliance. Jean tried to suppress a sigh. The teacher continued, explaining that their group leaders would be their seniors, the talents who had passed the group battle exam with excellent results. Jean, assigned to Group 2, looked up curiously as a soft voice stammered, "Hello, everyone." Baek Sang had been chosen as the leader of Group 2. Murmurs rippled through the students. Didn't she have the highest grades? Jean felt a wave of unease crash over him. What's going on? Baek Sang tried to keep her composure, declaring she looked forward to working with everyone, but Jean could see she was fidgeting nervously. He thought to himself that the leader's ability was crucial in group battles, and seeing her trembling only deepened his concern. Baek Sang's inner thoughts revealed her own panic. She had tried so hard to avoid Jean, yet he was in her group. Jean felt the doom of their situation settle in. Ma Jinseong stepped forward with a question, challenging her authority immediately. Could the leader be changed? Baek Sang's face hardened as she explained that the instructors had appointed the leaders and they couldn't be replaced. Even if the leader seemed unreliable, she snapped back with a steely glare. Do you have a problem? She asked, recalling her grandfather's words, if someone didn't listen, hit them, and they'd listen well. Jean blinked in disbelief, wondering what kind of grandfather would teach such a thing. Baek Sang didn't waver. She told Ma Jinseong that if he wanted to test her capability, he could go ahead. If he defeated her, she would recommend him as the leader and leave the 1001 Hall herself. Gasps erupted around them. There was no turning back now. Ma Jinseong, full of bravado, lunged forward with a powerful strike. Bloodstream phantom sword technique, flying blood bullet. Baek Sang let out a defiant humph as she braced for the incoming attack. With a determined expression and eyes glowing bright, she unleashed a fierce strike, her blade trailing a vibrant green aura as it cut through the air. Their swords clashed in a shower of sparks, and Baek Sang's overwhelming strength knocked Ma Jinseong's weapon away. She followed through with a palm strike to his chest, sending him flying across the room. Jin's eyes widened as he recognized her posture. It couldn't be. To use that technique, she would need a second sword. No, it couldn't be what he was thinking. It would be something capable of turning the entire divine cult upside down. Ma Jinseong staggered to his feet, his anger surging in a crimson aura. This was the minimum qualification to be called a master chi-infusing sword. The onlookers whispered in awe, marveling at the blood dragon Ma Clan's technique. Jean watched carefully as Baek Sang warned him to put the sword away unless he wanted to get seriously injured. Ma Jinseong roared, refusing to back down, but the teacher intervened, telling him he'd be crossing a line if he continued. Jean noted that the teacher's words were a pointed reminder about the founders of the 6 clans who created those laws. Ma Jinseong had no choice but to submit and back down. The students split into their groups, their leaders explaining the schedules in detail. Jean thought that this trial by combat had at least helped them unite under Baek Sang's leadership. Baek Sang even turned to Ma Jinseong with concern, asking if the place where he'd been hit was alright, though Jean couldn't help but wonder if it was genuine concern or subtle mockery. 15 days later, the training hall buzzed with energy as students drilled their formations. Baek Sang ordered them through the diagonal formation, then the sweeping ghost formation, and finally, the charging formation. Her voice was uncertain, but the students obeyed. Ma Jinseong approached Jin, frustration simmering. Would they all be eliminated because of that stupid leader? Jin just smiled, teasing Ma Jinseong about how he'd been knocked out in one blow by that same leader. Ma Jinseong sputtered in anger but admitted that Baek Sang's commands were clumsy. In the real mock battle, Ma Jinseong wanted Jin to give the orders instead, believing he was the only one who could unite them. Jin hesitated, but the training was suddenly interrupted by loud protests. San's group accused him of using the charging formation instead of the defensive one, risking their lives for nothing. Tensions flared, some called for San to step down as leader, claiming his tactical judgment was terrible. Jin watched silently as San faced them. He was known as the ceremonial demonic squad's father, the man who led the most despised squad with unwavering confidence. His commands were absolute, and his squad had always been willing to sacrifice themselves if he ordered it. But here, desperation fueled rebellion. San blared at them coldly. He said he wouldn't repeat himself if they didn't follow his orders, he would subdue them by force. The students sneered, daring him to try, but one student reminded them that desperation couldn't justify rebellion. If they didn't pull together, they'd be expelled without even taking the exam. Jin, still hiding and observing, realized this was no coincidence. Baek Sang and San's uncertain leadership, the forced obedience, it was as if the instructors were deliberately testing them, provoking rebellion to see how they'd respond. As evening sets in over the academy, we find San and Baek Sang slouched against the wall, both clearly exhausted. San exhales heavily, the weariness etched on his face. Baek Sang follows with a long sigh of relief. The two begin talking, their frustrations pouring out. San mentions how things aren't going too well, and Baek Sang instantly relates his group isn't exactly cooperative either. But San clarifies that while his group listens, they sometimes say unpleasant things. What truly bothers him is that despite their perseverance, it's an older guy, someone responsible for a past accident, that's the real problem. A useless bastard, in his words. Baek Sang laughs it off, joking about the terrible past of a great warrior, and San agrees, admitting that if it weren't for Senior Han's mediation, he probably would have been kicked out by now. Just then, San brings up something serious, he's been asked to recruit Baek Sang. But Baek Sang, keeping his stance firm, declines once again, stating that due to personal reasons, he can't join any group. San is left awkwardly hanging in the silence, thinking of a way to shift the conversation. He remembers there's someone significant in Baek Sang's group and decides to bring that up instead. Baek Sang stutters, trying to brush off the topic, but it's clear he's nervous. He mutters that they're completely screwed. San leans in, puzzled, and Baek Sang explains further. There's this guy in their group, he listens well and doesn't seem rebellious, but if he ever decided to crush Baek Sang, he could do it without effort. She lets out a frustrated scream, half joking, half serious. Suddenly, a voice cuts in, calm but commanding. Jin steps out of the shadows. He warns gently not to talk behind someone's back, especially when that person is right there. San and Baek Sang are stunned, their eyes wide in disbelief. Jin greets them formally but fumbles his words slightly, showing a rare vulnerability. Despite that, he gets straight to the point, he has something important to discuss with both of them. San is confused. Why him? Baek Sang, meanwhile, is already spiraling inside his mind. It's Jin Yomyeon. Jin Yomyeon. Over and over again, the name echoes in his thoughts. With a firm tone, Jin addresses San directly. He asks him to join him. San stares back, caught off guard. Does this young man even know who he is? But Jin does. He calls San by his former title, Massacre Blade Sandojian, the one who once led the Great Bear Stronghold. Baek Sang almost chokes on the nickname. Massacre Blade, he exclaims. Jin explains that he's been observing San, and even though San never tried to draw attention, his actions have spoken volumes. Jin was especially impressed when the seventh elder suddenly showed up with an entire mountain of herbs, something San had casually picked up on the way. Jin is honest, San has talent, but he also has weaknesses. Inner chi and proper martial arts. San reacts visibly to this. Can Jin really offer that? With absolute confidence, Jin makes a bold vow. By his name, Jin Yomiun, he promises to turn San into a transcendent master within 10 years. Baek Sang nearly loses it. A transcendent? San is silent, processing. In his previous life, Jin remembers San as someone who started late in second-rate martial arts but still became the ceremonial demonic squad leader. He used to vent to Jin sometimes, wishing for a good martial art or even an elixir. And now, right in front of him, is the very thing he used to dream about. Jin knows San can't refuse. If he accepts, he'll have the full support of the Demon Heaven Jin clan. Everything he once longed for is now within reach. Jin thinks eagerly, "Come on, say yes, Sandojian." San opens his mouth, struggling. And then, he apologizes. He turns Jin down.